It's my honor, truly, to facilitate this morning's conversation with Manette Mayberg and Dr. Ronit Ziv-Kreger. Manette, of course, you know her tremendous gift that she's given to all of us in bringing us together here today. Dr. Ronit Ziv-Kreger is the Director of Education and Leadership Development of an organization called Momentum in the Madonna way. It is formerly known as JWRP, the Jewish Women Renaissance Project. This morning, Manette will start us off talking for about 8 to 10 minutes about the vision for JWRP, the early years, her role Thank you so much.
Can I do a test to close it?
Her role in partnering with
Stays on. It's a microphone, so it stays on.
Slide out.
the professional group.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. And then we'll pass the mic over to Ronit. Ronit will talk about really the 2-year process that they use to hone in on all of the values within the organization, to choose from a wide menu of values and really hone in on the Jewish values that they ended up in. So we are going to hear about their perceived need that wasn't being met, the initial vision, the values, and of course the intersection of the vision and the values. So after those 10 minutes, we'll open up for broader conversation. Manette?
I don't know, I feel good standing up and that way I can see everybody. I don't want to have my back to anybody. So JWRP was founded 10 years ago, approximately, 11 maybe, in the very beginning, by 8 women who were brought together by one visionary, Lori Palatnik. She was one of the 8. And she really brought us together to change the world. It was like she knew each of us individually in different ways. We didn't all know each other, all 8, but she brought us together and she said to each of us, I want you to come and be a part of figuring out how we can change the world for the better, because look at what is going on around us. Like it just feels like we're just spiraling downward in morals and ethics and in world events. Everything that's going on just feels heavy. And let's see what we can do. I believe that the Jewish women are the key to change in the world, and of course it says in the Torah that the women were responsible for redeeming us from Egypt and will be responsible for the final redemption. And so based on that and her belief in the way that women operate in a different way than men, she said, let's bring women together and see what we can do to change the world. So we got together and we brainstormed. And at that point, we didn't even have a mission statement. We didn't, we really didn't have anything. We didn't know each other, but what was interesting was that she designed the group intentionally diverse, which became one of our very, very strong values, is diversity. Now, you would say, like, okay, these are a bunch of Jewish women, they all want to change the world, like, what's diverse? So what she designed into the group, other than we had a common interest in in the Jewish people, is that she intentionally brought in an age diversity, a religious diversity, a political diversity, and like stage of life diversity, basically, so that there were different perspectives that were just embedded into what was going to become the vision of this group. And so we brainstormed initially. I'll try to get through this part quickly because I want to get to the real core of what we're doing. But we brainstormed for a few days together, and we came up with like many ideas. It wasn't the mission to Israel was not the idea. It was one of the many ideas. And we paired up, and we each went off to work on our idea. Like, I was working on a national education campaign idea. It was like a totally different idea. And we all started working and on our ideas, and this idea of bringing women to Israel together on a experience, on some sort of transformational experience to imbue values into families and communities through women, that was the one that took off, and it started to get legs. And so we all abandoned the other ideas that we were working on, and everybody threw themselves behind this idea because we saw that it was, it was going more than the other ones were going. And we created, when we were together for those days, a mission statement that we wanted to bring Jewish values to the world through women, their families, their communities, and the idea is that then it would ripple effect to the world, because if you have enough women affecting enough families, affecting enough communities, then you're really affecting the world. And that was really the basis of the idea. So from the beginning, it was always about Jewish values. That really was our mission, to bring it back through as we know, the vast majority of women in the world who really are not connected in a way that they understand Jewish values, that they integrate them into their lives. They don't know what they don't know, right? So we had to figure out, how do we bring the values to those women so that we can start to create more and more who are disconnected with these important connections that really have the potential to make change in the world. So it is an obvious question already at this point, like, well, what are the values? But the funny thing was, we didn't really identify what those values were specifically in the initial stages. When we formulated the mission to Israel, every piece of that mission was very strategically thought through in terms of how are we going to embed values in these women who are coming on this experience? How are we going to convey the values? And the values sort of generated up from how we design the learning experiences. So, like, for instance, for many years, the mission started off with a talk on Lashon Hara. So we called it like gossip and slander, and we framed it for the women that, here we are, a group of women, we gotta understand how important it is how we speak, right? And it was given over to them in a way that they could understand it, and it lasted, we could see that they were utilizing this value immediately, because like they'd start to talk to their friend and they'd be like, oh no, I can't say that, so they got it. So the values kind of emanated that way. But what I want to talk about, because Ronit's going to take you through the process of how we did identify the values in detail, which didn't happen later till we had a professional staff. When we started out, we were just all volunteers. We were working off of our kitchen tables, basically. But what we did have, besides the diversity that was embedded in, we did have a few other values that I would say were really embedded into our core organization, which were partnership, really important. This was designed by partnership from the beginning. Our idea was always that, yes, it's obvious that there's a certain analogy with birthright going on here, right? Mm-hmm. So what we did was we say, no, we don't want to take women from all over the country, just individuals. We want them to go in groups. And so we utilized partners in cities across the globe, which now I'm proud to say we are up to 207 partners in 28 countries that we bring, but we always bring in partner groups. Organizational partners who are able to do the pre-work with the group, the post-work, and take them through a year-long experience. So that this isn't 8 days in Israel, this is a year-long experience. Because they have the support system when they get back. So partnership was a value that we embedded. As I just mentioned, we're in 28 countries. Global was always embedded as a value, that we wanted to reach people all over the world, that this wasn't a North American effort. This was really important to us. And to tell you the truth, some of our most beautiful, beautiful, proudest accomplishments have been in that global context of now bringing hundreds of Russians a year from the former Soviet Union, which has made a huge impact. There's been certain small Jewish communities in countries like Greece and Prague that you can make such a huge impact, almost like saving Jewish Greece, because it was really almost disappeared. So our global value has been something we're very, very proud of, and also we reached some decision points on the global piece where it's like, okay, some of these countries, they can't afford to even their plane fare, because our model, our economic model is that the trip is paid for, but the woman has to get there herself. So some of these countries we have to help even beyond the trip, and we had to make a strategic decision. Should we give up on those countries because we have to raise more resources? It's a strain on our resources, you know, and if we just concentrated on North American cities that can easily afford to pull their weight on this, right? That kind of decision. But we've stuck with our commitment to the global value. And then the last one, because I'm almost out of time, that I'll talk about is the empowerment. So it's not women's empowerment in the feminist sense. It's more that we really want to empower the individual, and this is to really transform themselves. It starts on the experience where we empower the women without the burden of their kids and their husband. They're there just themselves to present themselves. They can work on themselves when they're freed of those other responsibilities, and we really empower them to really go in deep and really take charge of how they're going to move forward. And we've been experimenting with many ways of continuing to empowerment. This is something we're constantly working on. We've done some leadership initiatives. We do a leadership conference every other year. We've done some in Latin America, in Israel for our European contingency, to empower leadership in our partners and in our participants. And we do a lot with asking the women to go back and feel empowered in their communities and to actually take action when they get back, which is really one of the pillars of, I'm done, right? So I'm going to hand it over to, we'll have time for questions later. There's a lot to say, obviously. But I just want to say that I could never have dreamed that I would have the privilege of working with a professional like Ronit. I insisted on being chair of the education committee so that I could be the one to work. So this is my committee. Education and Leadership Development is my committee. I'm a board member, I'm an executive committee member, and I am a former president of the organization. I served 2 years as president. And having Ronit join us and be able to work with her on a constant basis has really been, I think, the highlight of my entire experience with JWRP. She's incredibly competent, special, and creative, and thought partner.
Okay, now I can't say anything.
And that was all impromptu. I didn't even think it through.
Okay, thank you very much. So if I were a day school professional, what am I wanting to get out of this? So I'm going to start with that for a moment. And I want to say that something about the partnership between, a visionary and a trustee and a professional is something, that I think Manette and I really do have the privilege of, the Shekhinah Beinahin of really enjoying working with each other and working well together. And I hope that's something that is worth somehow taking in. I'm not sure how. So that's one thing. A second thing is taking a vision into practice when you have many constituencies, because when I'll describe the process, involved staff, involved visionaries, involved the board, involved an education committee, involved many different partners, so the process involves many different, and I think that is true also in day schools where you have many different types of constituencies and how you move a process. And then the other thing is that I would be listening to as a day school person is how to go from a need to a process to then, implementation to assessment. So I'm going to talk about that as well. So those are some things just to translate to World of Day School. So I want to talk about the need. So our work in our department, it involves the education, the leadership development, and the assessment. And there was, the goal, one of the 4 momentum goals is connecting with Jewish values. Others are engaging with Israel, taking action, and fostering unity without uniformity. We'll talk about connecting with Jewish values. How do we do that and assess that if we haven't named those values, clearly? And if you have conversations with people, and the assessment questions that we had were, are you more connected with Jewish values? Are you sharing Jewish values with your children? It's abstract. And if you want to assess something better, you need a little more concrete. So we went onto this journey of defining our values. It started with, okay, what are the values that the visionaries had put forth, like what Manette described. Then we had the staff talk about what are the most important values, and we came up with a list, internally with the staff. We brought it to the education committee, and wonderful people on our education committee who were there at the time, Dr. Erica Brown, and Michael Silberman from the I Center, and more recently, who's here with us in the conference is Laura Goodman. Goldman, thank you. We had Sora Wolowski, so a great team there. And one of the things that the education committee, what?
I was thinking of Abby.
Abby Dauber Stern was at the time on the committee, right? And she's now in Israel, and was very helpful. So the education committee said, "Woo, y'all named a long list," and you helped us. So first thing they said is this has to be something that people would be able to remember. And Erica mentioned the research about jam that some people might be familiar with. You put out 24 jams, nobody buys jam. You put out 6 jams, people leave with a jar of jam. Yeah, right. So she was like, go for 6. We have an 8-day trip. We went for 8, but so we honed down. We had a list. I don't remember exactly how many, if you count the number of decades, but we ended up with some. We came to our board. We made these images of one value, and you can look at them. There were a draft of possibilities. We allowed each, did an activity where board members each selected, I forget how many, maybe 3 that they got to select of what they thought were the top 3. Every board member shared. We took notes, and we created a board committee, a subcommittee of the board that would then work on it. And really it was the committee work wanted us to look at what are the values already that Momentum has, especially on the trip in our work. What are the values that we're already utilizing? And through that, really, we honed down to 8. We brought it back to the board. We brought it back to the committee meeting, to the committee to hone the language. And marketing then honed the language, and you will see the 8 values are here in this annual report, and we ended up with 8, and then started the work of how do we take these 8 values: learning and growth, courage, peace and wholeness in the home. I get here I can use the English. Limud ve'itlamdut, azut kedusha, Shlom Bayit, faithfulness and trust, emunah, human dignity, kvod habriot, generosity, chesed v'tzedakah, unity and mutual responsibility, achdut v'aravut, and gratitude, hakarat hatov. And how do we then take these and make the experience on the Momentum trip, as well as before and throughout the whole year when the women come back from and really such that it's impactful. And that involved working with the, so to speak, the teachers on the trip. We call them the trip leaders that give all the content to redesign their classes. a lot of work. If you have a whole bunch of superstar, influential, rock star kind of presenters, and you want to tell them, like, now let's unify some of these classes and go tell Lori Kalaplik and Adrian Gold and Charlie Harari, well, we have a plan for you. Now we've chosen some new values. Yeah, good luck. So that's work in progress. I literally just got a text from Israel. We have now several hundred women on an experience in Israel that we're running for the first time. On one of the days there was no class. So we put on the day that's the Unity and Uniformity a new class, a brand new class on Unity, and you just heard that it was fantastic. And first time, literally now as we speak. So this is work in process of on the trip, right? So this is kind of describes the work on the trip. Then if you have 207 partner organizations, multiple educators from each partner organization, you have some variance in how well they're facilitating a year-long experience for these groups. So now we created curricular resources on each of these values for each of the sessions when they're back home to do a deeper dive in. And we're partnering with Cohen to publish that as a book. Wow. But by design, it's designed so there's facilitators, guidance for every woman, because we know that not necessarily the facilitator is going to be the world's best educator always, but there might be another person in the circle who is. So it's called the Year of Growth. Now, for each about 50 partners, we have a person on staff that works with them. Those people, about half of our partners are using this Year of Growth curriculum resources in the United States, about half of them, and worldwide about, I forget, 38%. Because we're in translation now into Spanish and into Russian. The partnership development manager who's on staff who works with about 50 partners, they came to us and said, we need to understand the curricular resources better so we can help these facilitators do a better job. So now we're doing a whole process with them. On the trip, we redesigned a trip journal along each of the days and each of the values, so that women, when they're learning ideas, can jot down and start making plans for themselves for how they're going to embed these values back into their family and into their lives and with their children. So these are all now processes of how you take the work that was done and bring it in. In terms of assessment, great. In terms of assessment, no longer are we only asking, are you more connected with Jewish values on our quantitative assessment, but for each of these 8 values, have some questions where we ask much more specifically. And an example, and you have that in whatever the app thing, you can see all of this.
A guidebook.
Yeah. So that's in terms of assessment. Some of the ongoing open questions for us is continuing to do the work internally to actually live these values and model these values and take them in and have everybody on the staff, deeply understand what's very Jewish about each of these. Because sometimes in the English they can sound like, public school values, gratitude, generosity, courage, right? How do we really pull out the depth of the Jewish values out of it?
I just want to point out something that she said from the funder board member perspective, is that when the values were actualized over the 8 days of the trip, so the first time, like, the board members generally visit trips at least every couple of years or so. I mean, I'll visit one every year. I might not go on the whole trip, but I'll go in and out of a trip. And I will tell you that the reaction of the supporters, the board members who saw that being actualized, because they were collaborated with on the work of the values. So it wasn't like we walked into the trip and saw these values. It was like we had helped to bring those values to bear, to select them and through the process. And when we saw them come alive on the trip, I can tell you, like, it was a wow, like, for every one of us. Like, the feedback was like, I can't believe this, how they've integrated it into, because before, of course the values were all the core of the trip, but now it was like it was illuminated, see that? It was illuminated in a way that was so tangible, it was so beautiful, like it was so accessible, like to the point where you would walk into like a session on the trip and you would see the value of the day, like in a, what do you call those things that stand up? You know, those banners, that like those standing banners, and these gorgeous standing banners that were like announcing the value of the day, and then the trip leader would get up and talk about that value to frame the day, and it just like really gave the whole trip like a whole new level of meaning.
There are a lot of visuals, pieces. So two things I can say about that was, one was that we had board members sit and do an assessment of the talks on the trip with me, right? We said Andrea and you and several board members assessed each of the trips and the degree to which it's actually helping to illuminate the value. And we asked the trip leaders, we created the visuals on the presentation, and I forgot my whole thing, right? But we created the visuals so that they, at the end of the trip, walked all the participants back through this journey. So they did it kind of like a recall of the whole journey of putting the puzzle back together for people. So it were ways to use visuals to help the trip leaders get on board with what we were doing and how we were doing it.
Ronit and Manette, one of the things that we all just learned is how much depth and consideration and thoughtfulness went into the construction. And I have no doubt that the two of you can continue this conversation for a very long time. We have 5 to 7 minutes for questions to open up to everyone here. So if anyone would like to ask either about the presentation or about another aspect of momentum that you haven't heard about, with an eye towards the lived values and the relationship between the visionary and the actualization.
I want to ask about the name change.
Yeah, so I was actually going to start with it, but I'll end with it. It really, the key of it is that it's global. Global is one of our values, as I said. And we discovered that the name JWRP was very, very difficult in other languages. It didn't mean anything. They couldn't say it. They didn't understand the letters. They couldn't remember it. And so in the spirit of really living our value of being global, we finally, it was very hard for the founders and honestly, a lot of the supporters who have been with us from the beginning. It's JWRP. But like really, now that we've gotten over that hump and we have visited it many times before and actually decided, no, we're not changing. And when we finally made this decision, like it's flowing really well. And the word momentum is across all the languages, at least that we utilize over the 28 countries, it's the same. The word momentum, everybody understands it. Everybody knows momentum.
Wow.
With the meaning, with the correct meaning. Yeah.
Adam?
This model is, and the way you told the story feels unique to me. I'm wondering, to what extent has this process been investor-driven or professional-driven?
It's a really good question. I mean, I guess if you asked it, you'd have different answers. Go ahead.
I feel that Manette and I do a lot of thinking together. It's not that we meet that often or for so long, but we,
But regularly.
and I feel like we love throwing ideas back and forth. We respect each other's thinking. We do quite a bit of thinking on our own, I think, too, that we bring to each other. So it's in some ways a little bit hard to fully identify.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say something similar, even on the global organizational level, if that's what you're talking about.
I was thinking on every level, yeah.
Yeah, on the global organization, my opinion is it is so 50-50, like it's very balanced. We have a really strong board, like most of our founding group is still very active, and it's like a baby, like you never want to give up your baby, and at times we almost have to pull back because we're so unusually involved as a board. But our professional staff that we put in place is just so passionate, like the board is, has so much of the same passion that I feel that we really drive each other. I can't say it's weighted so much one way or the other, which maybe is part of the magic of it. We really do work together.
The question was somewhat coy because you just gave the language for it. That's precisely how it came across and why it seems so rich and positive, and why the organization seems so strong, is that the alignment between the investors and lay leadership and the professionals is so deep.
Yeah.
And also your collaboration is on the values level and not on the operational level. And you really are trusting your team, your professional team. On the other hand, the professional team really trusts the lay leadership and investors. And that seems so clear.
I want to give a shout out to Orly Turetz, who's here, also as the Chief of Staff, and her role before becoming Chief of Staff was really facilitating this process, and she really helped us with the board staff
It's
work.
a really good point. Like, really, the right facilitation goes a long way. You're exactly right. And I would also say to that transparency for sure has become a value of the organization, and I think that also inures to our benefit that way. Anybody else?
Other questions?
Otherwise, we have something we could talk about.
I have exactly 3 minutes left.
We're thinking this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hold on one
Talk
second.
about
Does anyone
I do
have?
have a question.
Yeah, Michelle.
I'll back up for a second and say one of the things that I always tell Ronit strikes me about this project that I love is that it's not school-based, that it's focused on the home as the locus of Jewish life, as the woman and mother of the family, as the leader of that enterprise, and the need for formative experiences as well as formative education to impact that person and through her the rest of the family. I think there's something really brilliant about your conception that way.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty unique actually
Yes.
in the world of Jewish education. And I'm curious whether you talk about that with other funders, whether it's impacting your own vision of what else to fund and how, or whether you're trying to make any kind of paradigm shift in terms of how funders in general think about Jewish continuity and impact based on what you find here.
That's an interesting question.
You have 1 minute to answer.
Oh, okay, then I'll go on fast speed. No, I would say, like, for sure we do talk about it in the context of development. I mean, we definitely do talk about what you just described. But I haven't really thought of applying it to other areas in the same way. Like, I feel that
I'll say a way that we're applying it. I'm going to cut you off because we don't have time.
Tell me.
So there's something that we've cooked up and talked about now for quite a long time that's actually coming into play and builds on the question that you're asking. So both Manette and in a different way are passionate both about this work with parents, and we work not only with mothers now but also with fathers with Momentum. But we're also passionate about day schools. And we're very passionate about the home-school relationship and about how important that is. The same way that if we did work on a trip and it never went home for a year long with the women, then really how much is it going to make a difference? Same thing if you just have a fabulous class for the children at school and when they go back home it's different values and the whole thing is unveiled. We all know it's not the same kind of impact, right? So that's on our minds, and we are now going to be piloting with some support, both with Ayaka and with Prisma and with others, a trip specifically for Momentum participants who are also day school educators. And we're going to, in 2020, do a full bus of day school educators who fit the Momentum participant criteria. So they're, in this case, we're going to start with mothers, so that they're participants in Momentum. They'll do a whole Momentum experience. We'll pull out one day. We'll add and do that specifically an educator day that day instead of taking this mitzvah and Yam HaMelech, which I think educators don't necessarily need. Could do something more directly for them. We'll add an extra 2 days and to the trip. So rather than being an 8-day, it will be a 10-day experience with 2 specifically for educators, and we're planning on having the partnership helping.
Pedagogy partnership.
Yes, to be part of this too. We haven't even spoken, but that's in our plan. And the idea is that the year-long experience, the kind of network weaving that Deborah has developed expertise with, we would bring in not only on the trip, like an JEIC and a partnership pedagogy, but also throughout the year some work so that the educators could do work with that. So that's, we're, prototyping, piloting, I don't know, this in summer 2020, but with an eye towards doing more of that with thinking about the importance of this.
It would be really cool if those educators can now take the mothers of their schools.
Yes.
Well, we
Yes.
do partner with schools, by the way. We have been doing some of that with community schools. Yeah.
My friends, I could sit here and listen to this for a whole lot longer. I apologize
That
that
went
we
so
need
fast.
to. Yes.
But that was what we wanted to talk about, by the way, so you got it. Renee picked it up from the question. We wanted to talk about the educator, tell you we're doing